Here in Canada, we have so much. Sometimes we don't even think about the fact that we have so much because we don't know what it's like to have less. But there are places all around the world where people are content with less. And there are people in Canada even who are content with less than what you have. I don't even know what you have, but I can almost guarantee you there is somebody in Canada with less. You might find it hard to think, how can I be content with less? I want stuff. I love stuff. I like to swim. I want a pool. I like to play basketball. I need a basketball hoop. There are lots of things that we like, we want. But can we be content not to have them? That's what we're talking about this week. To be content with what you have. We're going to hear some stories about a person who struggled through a lot of hardships and still was content with what he had, which was pretty much just his life. He didn't have stuff. He just was still alive and he was content. I think one of the hardest struggles we have is if we watch television, which probably you do, or videos on your computer, you're going to see examples of people who have a lot. Big fancy houses, the kind of dog you'd like to have, or bunny rabbits and ferrets, the kinds of pets you'd like. And it's hard when you see things that you would like to have and you don't have. It's really hard to still be content. But it can be done. It's all a matter of perspective, of understanding that what you have is enough. If you can learn that, then you can be content. And our Bible verse today, Psalm 16:11, yes, another one from Psalms. You have made known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. Our goal in life is to make it to heaven. So whether we have lots of stuff or not, it won't matter. It won't matter when we're in heaven how comfortable our houses were. We can be happy with just our lives. If you have a house, you had more than Paul. If you have a pet, a bicycle, a car, a computer, a television, a family that you could stay with, if you are somewhere where you feel safe, a culture and a community that you can trust, then you have more than Paul. And you'll hear more about Paul when I do our story time. It's okay to strive. It's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to have a goal and to work towards a goal. But if not having something is making you sad or jealous, then that's not good. And that's not how God wants us to live our lives. Be content and not jealous or envious and not want what other people have. Just be content with what you have, with the life that you live. When you look at people who have been missionaries, who have gone to other countries and seen what the people have and how content they are. I will share my story from when I was a missionary. I lived in Mexico for 4.5 months, and I traveled from one state in Mexico, because it's actually called the United States of Mexico. I traveled from one state to another, from town to town, almost every week. And what I did was I would act. I was part of a Christian theater company, and we would perform plays and spread the knowledge of Jesus that way, and encourage churches in Mexico by doing plays. And when I was there, I can remember that they would feed me, and I would be so full, and I'd say, oh, I just can't eat anymore. I'm so full. And thinking to myself, these people have barely any money. How is it that they can afford to feed me so well? And that's because they're generous. They have such a generous heart, those people. And I was really blessed. And they were content. When I came back to Canada, I remember thinking that I was so blessed. When I came back to my family's home, I was so blessed. I had my own bedroom. I was so blessed that we had a backyard. I was so blessed that I could feel safe. I was so blessed that my mom would ask me, hey, what would you like for dinner tonight? And then we could have anything. Well, I don't know if we could have anything we wanted, but we could make requests instead of, this is all the food we have in the house, so I'm going to make something out of this. And that's another thing. I never heard anyone complain about food when I was in Mexico. They were so content with what they had. And somebody would open the cupboard or the pantry and they'd say, okay, this is what I have. And they'd make food from that. Children never complained. Not once. I remember, I was staying in people's houses. Not once did I hear a child complain that they didn't like the food their mom had made. Never. Because they were content. And I encourage everyone to do mission work or relief work at least once in their lives, because it will open your heart and your mind. It'll change your perspective on things, and you will realize how easy it is to be content and how little we actually need in life. Haiti, Botswana, Brazil, Hong Kong, Yugoslavia, Bolivia, Chile, China, Ukraine, Mexico. Bringing the gospel, hope, healing, encouragement, truth, love, meaning, and peace.
I wasn't sure at first, but I knew God had a plan for me in the group to pray, empower, and show them God's love through our actions, to let them know we sincerely cared and loved them a lot.
I thought I'd be ministering all the time in different places. I expected to reach mostly Christian communities.
So today, we are talking about being content, even when times are tough. Can you hear any of the noises that I hear in my tent today? Believe it or not, it is snowing. We have some great stories in the Bible of being able to overcome hardships. And in the Bible, the Apostle Paul writes a letter to the church in Corinth. So I've taken Paul's letter and I've turned it into a bit of a story for you. Paul sat with his back against a rock and looked out at sea. He was in the middle of writing a letter and had drifted off to sleep. Sleep he needed desperately. When he had been in Corinth, he felt so shy among the Christians at the church. Paul knew better than anyone that he was imperfect. People often treated him like a second Jesus, but he wasn't. He was just a man who struggled and suffered so much. To him, it seemed that it was almost every day. In spite of this, Paul smiled. He still had the sun to warm him and the fresh breeze blowing across his skin, which is probably why he'd fallen asleep. He still had knowledge of Jesus Christ, which he shared with anyone he could. That knowledge made everything else seem worth it. He picked up his pen and started writing again. 5 times I've received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. Had it really been that many? That is 195 times he'd been whipped. He continued. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Well, he thought, 3 times was more than enough for anyone. Once I was pelted with stones. That time, he really thought he was going to die. Stoning was a very common form of execution among the Jews. 3 times I was shipwrecked. Well, that was not because people were attacking him. However, it still counts as a difficulty. Twice they had been rescued in just a few hours. However, he would never forget that one time that he'd been tossed about by the waves, holding on to a piece of mast. When the storm ended, Paul had seen no one else alive in the water. He was alone for the rest of the night. When the sun came up, it became so hot that Paul was tired. He knew he couldn't fall asleep, though. He couldn't risk letting go of the mast, so he had stayed awake the whole day. Then, just when he felt he couldn't hold on any longer, a ship had come to investigate the wreckage, seen him, and pulled him, half drowned, from the sea. Paul shivered. Even though the sun was at its zenith, the memory of that night and day still made him shiver. He continued to write. I have been constantly on the move. I've been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from the Gentiles. Truly, it seemed that everyone was out to get him, and sometimes he didn't know who to trust. In danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false believers. Oh, when he spelled it out like this, he was lucky to be alive. Chuckling, he thought, no, not lucky. Blessed. He knew that God still had plans for him. I have labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have gone without food. I have been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of my concern for all the churches. Who is weak and I do not feel weak? Who is led into sin and I do not inwardly burn? If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. The God and Father of the Lord Jesus, who is to be praised forever, knows that I am not lying. In Damascus, the governor had the city guarded in order to arrest me, but I was lowered in a basket from the window in the wall and slipped through his hands. Despite all of these miraculous rescues, Paul still struggled though. He struggled almost daily to be a better person. He had fallen on his knees so many times and begged God to make him more perfect, more like Jesus. God had told him to stay strong. He had reassured Paul, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul had realized that by being imperfect, he had allowed God's perfection to show. In a way, it made the struggles easier. Every impossible situation that Paul overcame was a testimony to God. It was like shouting to the world, hey world, look! How amazing is my God! Paul finished his letter, and that is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties, for when I am weak, then I am strong. It was a good letter, and Paul hoped it encouraged someone, anyone, who was struggling. If we think about that letter that Paul wrote, what did he have to be happy about? He had suffered a lot. And that wasn't like, I have suffered like this my whole life. That was like, I have suffered like this since the death of Jesus. So, I mean, we're not talking like 40 years, all these things. Like, all these things happened to him quite close together. He was running for his life a lot because a lot of the Jewish religious leaders didn't want the story of Jesus Christ taught. You have to realize that people back then most of them were polytheists, which means they believed in many gods, right? And so the teaching of Christianity is that there's only one God. And so the religious leaders of other religions didn't want that being taught, that there was only one God. The Jewish leaders didn't want that the God of the Father of Jesus is God the Father. They wanted to stick to the stories that they had always been taught. They were still waiting for their Messiah. And so if you think about all the things that poor Paul went through, I mean, he'd been shipwrecked, he'd been beaten, he'd been stoned, he'd been hit with rods, whips. He had bandits attack him. He had gone through storms. The rivers had been overflowing. He couldn't escape. He didn't know who to trust. So what did he have to be happy about? What did he have to be content about? Really, not much. The only thing he really had to be content about was that he was still alive and could still do the work that God wanted him to do. And he didn't want to suffer. I mean, he did ask God, help me. Help me. I don't want to suffer so much. He called the thorn in his side, and nobody really knows what that means. I mean, was it a sickness? Was it just that life was so hard? Did he have a sin he struggled against? We don't really know, and he doesn't tell us, and it doesn't matter. The point is, he struggled, and he begged God to help him. He begged God to make it easier, and God said, don't worry that you are struggling, because when you overcome those struggles, you show people how powerful I am. So that made Paul feel more content. So now we're going to read the Kingdom of Heaven. The Kingdom of Heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the workers on payment of 1 denarius, he sent them into his vineyard for the day. Walking to the marketplace was one of his favorite things, so at about 9 in the morning, he took a walk. As he approached, he saw people who had not been there in the early morning. They were standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He said to them, "You also go into my vineyard, and I will give you whatever is right." It was already a little late in the day to work vineyard, but if he was willing to pay them, then they would go. The workers were happy to have work for the day, so off they went. At about noon and about 3, the landowner went down to the marketplace again. Again, he offered people work. Again, the people were delighted, even though it was so late in the day, that someone was willing to give them work. And off they went without even asking how much they would be paid. Then, at about 5, he went and found others standing around, and he said to them, "Why have you been standing here all day doing nothing?" The workers stared at him in disbelief. "We stand here because no one has hired us," they said. He smiled at them. "Ah, well, you also go into my vineyard," he told them. "You may work the rest of the day for me, and I will pay you what is right." They quickly glanced at each other. Was he serious? The day was almost over, and the sun would be setting soon. And he was serious, so they ran as fast as they could to join the other workers in the vineyard. They were thrilled to have the chance even so late in the day. When the evening came, the landowner of the vineyard told his foreman, "Call the workers and give them their pay, starting with the last and ending with the first." When the workers who had been hired at 5 came to collect their pay, they received 1 denarius. Some were almost weeping with gratitude when they accepted their pay. They had never dreamed they would be so well taken care of. The group of people who had been hired at 3, noon, and 9 also came to collect their pay of 1 denarius. When the first ones came, they assumed they'd get more. After all, they had worked the full day, far longer than anyone else. But they also received 1 denarius each. When they received it, they began to complain to the landowner. "How is this fair? These men put in 1 hour. You made them equal to us. We worked all day, from sunrise to noon. We worked through the heat of the afternoon and into the evening. We didn't quit, even though our muscles were sore and we were tired." The landowner replied to one of them. "How is this fair?" he said. "Friend, you're not being wronged. Didn't you agree with me on 1 denarius? Take what is yours and go. I want to give this last man the same as I gave you. You are getting no more or less than we agreed on. Don't I have the right to do what I want with what is mine? Are you jealous? Because I'm generous." Now, if we think about our story, how happy were the workers when they received their pay? They all received the same pay, but they weren't all experiencing the same feeling about that pay. When the early morning workers were hired, they agreed they'd work for the day for 1 denarius. And that's what they got. The other workers had no idea how much they were going to make. They just went and were happy to have work. They knew they were starting late in the day, and the landowner said, "I'll be fair, don't worry." So they probably expected quite a bit less. But in the end, everyone got the same pay, even though everyone did not do the same work. And the people who had been hired in the early morning, they felt that they weren't being treated fairly at first. But then the landowner said, "But I have treated you fairly. Because we agreed on 1 denarius, you got 1 denarius. The landowner didn't say that he would pay them by the hour. He said, "I'll pay you for a day's work." And the thing I love about this story personally is that the other workers didn't have the chance to start when the sun came up. They weren't there when the landowner went there the first time. But he was such a generous person that even though it was late in the day when they found out they could work, he still paid them the same amount. And that is what the kingdom of heaven is like. That we all receive the same grace. We all receive the same love. Even though some of us, like myself, have been Christians for most of our lives, I'm going to get the same rewards in heaven as somebody who becomes a Christian 10 minutes before they die. But there's enough heaven to go around, though, don't you think?
It depends on what us in North America and them consider a lot. Ukraine is a very poor country. So many are without water, shelter, access to proper health care. Then many do have enough to live comfortably and have all those things, though it's still very poor. What they did have was a warmth, a gratitude for what they did have.
We sure had a lot of time alone with God, and lots of food and friendship. We didn't really need anything else.
Oh my, no. In so many places, most people in town didn't even own their own car. If you needed to travel, you would walk or take the crowded, very crowded, bus like everyone else. In many places, people didn't have bedrooms. You slung a hammock up in the living space and took it down every night.
Different people had different things. Some of the kids in Haiti didn't have enough food to eat, which you could tell because their hair was orange instead of a nice, rich black, and their clothes were tattered. In Africa, they had their own homes and property, but they were modest huts with only essentials in them. In Africa and Yugoslavia, there was a lot of fear and brokenness. Some were sick, some were blind, some were hopeless, empty, or sad. It's time for our impact prayer. Father God, we praise you because you are so good to us no matter what our lives are like. You show us mercy, kindness, and care in every situation. God, we ask you to help us to tell you how we're feeling. You want us to speak to you about everything. When we don't have an attitude of contentment, we ask that you can show us how to see our situation differently and how to be grateful. I confess that sometimes I am whiny, I complain, and I'm grumpy. Maybe I have some other bad attitudes too. I do understand that I am blessed, and I confess that sometimes I forget. I thank you for all the happy times I've had this week, every good and beautiful moment. I thank you for that. I thank you that you provide opportunities for me every day to see how much you love me, opportunities for me to be content with what I have. And like Paul, I have my life. I have the opportunity to talk about you, to teach people about you, and to live the way you want me to live. And that I thank you for. In Jesus' name, Amen.
Yes, I thought Mexico was like a Spanish-speaking Canada, but in one place everyone had bars on their windows and barred gates on the door and they could lock themselves safe in their home at night. I was expecting Taco Bell type food, but that is not what I got. It's like a whole new world.
I sure was surprised by how loving, giving, and kind other people were, even if they were not from my own church or church denomination.
Yes and no. After doing some studying on Ukraine and hearing stories from friends living there, I was aware of how things unfortunately are going. Ukraine is an oppressed country in an ongoing state of conflict and war, so I expected, well, more conflict, crime, sadness. A serious incident happened when I was there, and everyone just carried on with life, content and happy despite the circumstances they were in. It was inspiring.
Hello! Here's our new memory verse. Psalm 16:11. You will show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and the pleasures of living with you forever. That's an awesome verse. Now I'm going to show you a fun way to memorize it. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Psalm 16:11. You will show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and the pleasure of living with you forever.
Yay! All right, so Alexa's going to get a treat, and I am going to turn a piece of paper upside down.
That's
And
the
now-
most obvious one.
Our goal is to remember what I turned upside down. All right, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
You can't have the reward with you. It has to be at the end.
But I thought you said I was going to get a treat.
You just did. Now you're going to get another one. Do it again.
Okay. 16, 11.
Good.
You will show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and the pleasure of living with you forever.
Oh,
Yay.
she's too good. All right, I'm going to turn two of them upside down now. All right, let's see. You ready?
I'm getting my treat.
Oh my goodness, this will be a little treat.
I was just getting one.
Oh, all right. Now I've made it really tricky for you. You think you can still do it?
I'll try.
Nice attitude.
16, 11. You show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and the pleasure of living with you forever.
Oh, she's too good. I'm gonna do this one. I'm gonna do this one. And
I'll be able to remember forever.
you will.
Psalm 16, 11. You will show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and the pleasure of living with you forever.
Oh my goodness. All right, little Miss Marty.
I bet you're going to turn them all over
Ooh, how did you know?
because I'm smart. And you.
All right.
Psalm 16, 11. You will show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and the pleasure of living with you forever. Did I do it?
You did. I think you're ready. Do you think you're ready for me to turn them all upside down?
No.
All right, let's do three more. We'll do joy of, presence, and the way.
Goodness, little feet. Okay. Psalm 16, 11. You will show me the way of life, granting me the pleasure, the joy of your presence and the pleasure of living with you forever. Did I do it?
You did. All right. There it is, Alexa. The truest challenge. Declan, what are you doing? Giving her points? She's got 100 points. Did I get that right? The final challenge. The final countdown. Go for it, Alexa.
Psalm 16, 11. You will show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and
So what you said was, you will show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and the...
pleasure
Yeah!
of living with you forever.
Yay!
I started to learn about how God talks to us and how personal and present God is when we seek Him, and sometimes when we are not even looking for Him.
I grew up a lot. I learned that sharing isn't always giving from the abundance of what you have, but simply giving from whatever you've got. I learned how unimportant money, status, and possessions truly are.
Humbled by their generosity, though the poor had nothing, they would always give half of their food to someone who was hungry. I was inspired by their faith. When you tell the African people that God will heal them, they believe you, and they are healed. Seeing people healed, I was encouraged to pray for healing back home.
I would be lying if I said it didn't. It was very hard not to win us as North Americans go and see how good we have it in Canada and America. Sometimes we forget how truly blessed we are. I guess I was annoyed but realized we just have two different cultures in which one needs some support. I learned that simplicity and gratitude, well, they go a long way.
It's time for the Your Turn challenge. This week, be someone's secret friend. Have you ever heard of a secret Santa? A secret Santa gives a Christmas present, but they don't let the person know that it's from them. So you're going to be a secret friend. Do something nice for somebody this week and don't let them know. Like if you have somebody who's got a job they have to do, like maybe it's their turn to unload the dishes from the dishwasher, do it. Don't tell them it was you. Maybe you have a sibling, a brother or sister, who loves to play a specific game and it's not your favorite. Why don't you ask them, hey, would you like to play this game with me? And offer to play the game they like, but don't tell them why. Give someone a secret present, like maybe you have some gum or some candy, just leave it on their pillow with a little note that says for you. Or if it's not someone who lives with you, you can put it on their doorstep for you. Like for example, you could get some tea and put it on my doorstep and say, for Meredith. But try to find a secret way to be a good friend this week. You will discover something amazing. You will discover that by being nice to someone else without expecting anything back actually makes you feel better. Even though, let's say, you don't have that tea or you don't have that gum anymore, you're going to feel so good. Or you played that game that you don't like to play and you feel really good about watching how happy that made your brother or your sister. Remember when I talked to those two sisters and Justina said for her the best part of giving was to watch how happy it made someone. So give it a try and I think you're gonna like it.
Trust. Having not traveled much and being apprehensive, I put my full faith and trust in God, not in myself, and seeing what He has done in my friend's life there. I learned life's not just about stuff. It's about experience, people, and faith.
Being content with God was and is to have His peace, being in relationship with Him. I don't really need anything else. Besides, anything else I needed was supplied, like food and friendships and relationships.
I had to learn how to be content when hungry. It was a different experience for me. I've always been well fed. Also, even though I was hungry, I never starved. Even though I had no place to stay sometimes, I always found a safe shelter. Even though I had no money saved up, I was still able to travel from place to place and to minister because the money came when I needed it. Being content means trusting God, trusting that you have what you need.
We are ridiculously blessed. We have way more than we need. When you have nothing, or you're around people that have nothing, you begin to appreciate everything and be grateful.
We have so much. Being around people with less makes you appreciate that. Being a missionary also makes you willing to do without a lot of stuff because you've seen people be content with far less.
I learned how to love other people outside my world by how they loved me first. That is knowing that God's love is real, the feeling that makes a heart content.
If anyone ever has the desire or interest to do missionary work, I would highly recommend going for it. It will change you in different, but a very good way.
All right, here we are at our Remember Tree. We haven't seen our Remember Tree in a few weeks, have we? So let's do a quick review. We have trail mix that reminds us that God's way is yummier and better for everyone. Then we have, what have we got next? The spiritual power food, that it's important to feed your spirit and not just your body. The mirror reminds us that we need to be humble and that what God sees is way more important than what anybody else sees. We have our compass. Our compass reminds us that having godly wisdom is more important than being right. Then we have, what's over here? Oh, our map. Yeah. The map reminds us that choosing God's way is better than choosing our way. Oh, our binoculars. God's justice is always fair. And our newest thing is the rope, which we talked about last week. Choosing godly friends. It's really important to choose godly friends. It's important to choose friends that will encourage you to do what's right and respect your boundaries. And today, our newest item on our Remember Tree is a bottle of water. Now, how is a bottle of water going to remind us to be content with what we have been given in life? To be content even when we're struggling. To be content even when we see that somebody else has things that we don't have. How does a water bottle remind us of that? Well, think about this. How many of you would rather drink water than anything else? No, not me either. Maybe you are one of those people who would rather drink water. But most people like a little different flavor, like juices. Some people like pop. Some people like milk or chocolate milk or tea or coffee. And if I'm hiking or I'm out camping, chances are I have water. Water is so important and a lot better for me than most of the other drinks that I mentioned, because water gives me what my body needs. It might not be the yummiest thing out there, but it's all I really need in terms of a drink. And so that's how our bottle of water is going to remind us, because although there might be something we'd rather drink, we have to remember that even though I might rather drink something else, all I need, really, is to be hydrated. All I need is water. And I need to be content with that. See you next week.